Okay, let's go ahead and get started. I'm Lucia Navarra, Head of Content for Enchanting Travels. Thank you for joining us this evening. This has obviously been an unprecedented time in the travel industry, and we are so glad that you're here to work with us, and hopefully we can inspire some wanderlust for you. You may have heard about Enchanting before, or been on a trip with us before, but as a reminder of what Enchanting's all about, we provide tailor-made individual travel that inspires that joy that happens when you first step off the plane and somewhere just incredible. We really pride ourselves on our experts having really deep, detailed knowledge of our destinations. And what that means for you is that you get to have personal, unique experiences and be able to enjoy the joy of travel in a safe way. We were able to really expand our portfolio over the last year or so because we have the backing of our Travelopia, which is our large group over us. We were able to bring our expansion plans to reality much more quickly than we had thought possible. So we now are able to offer destinations in North America, Central America. We added a lot of portfolio in Europe, including Iceland and Russia in the north. We went to the Middle East for the first time in Oman and the UAE. And we also opened up Oceania with destinations in Australia, Cook Islands, Fiji, and French Polynesia. I'm going to go ahead and introduce you to our hosts tonight, our experts on Italy and Greece. Shannon has 8 years of experience in the travel industry and really loves digging in on detail with her guests on what would make their trip really have a wow factor. Bo is also a senior travel consultant. He's taught English in Asia and has traveled all over the world before settling back here in Denver. And he also loves introducing people to kind of going deeper in destinations and the culture and the cuisine and getting to know people in the places that we're going. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Shannon.
Thank you, Lucia. Well, I was really excited to be asked to be on this webinar tonight because Italy is absolutely one of my favorite countries. And I had the pleasure of being able to visit recently this past September after rescheduling, I think it was 5 times, as a lot of people had to do in the past year and a half. But I finally made it there, and I'm so glad that I did have the opportunity to go there, especially at the time that I did. So if we move on to the next slide, I think that's the map that kind of shows the route that I took. So we started our trip in Venice, and then we just kind of worked our way down. So I wanted to just go through each destination that we were able to visit. And when I talk about we, it was my husband and I. We were celebrating our 20th anniversary this past year. So it all worked out perfectly. And I could not think of a better destination for doing that. So first I'm going to talk about Venice, if you want to. Great. So Peter, and I know you don't have your mic on, but I don't know if you want to put your hand up if you've been to Venice or been to any of these destinations. If not, I'll go ahead and kind of go through some of the highlights and some tips that I learned traveling there and that I also like to tell guests when I'm putting together. Okay, so it looks like you have been to Venice before. Perfect. And okay, if you put your hand down and then put it back up if you plan to go back, or maybe put in the chat if there are specific areas in Italy that you'd like to discuss. Great. Venice. Okay. All over Europe. Okay, great. Well, feel free to put any specific questions that you have in the chat box. We can kind of cater it to you as well. So what I wanted to point out, I don't know if you had the chance to visit this area in Venice the last time you were there, but I loved going to the rooftop of this shopping mall. The mall is actually in a historic building in Venice, but I loved seeing Venice from this viewpoint because, as you probably know since you were there, when you're in Venice, you feel like you're kind of in a maze. So it was really nice to get out and up to be able to overlook Venice and really see how beautiful the city really is, and get a more of a vantage point from the rooftop. in this sense. So one thing I like to point out and talk about that Enchanting Travels includes that I really love is that if you can see, like if you're staying in a hotel that's right on the canal, the water taxis are going to drop you off, and it's pretty easy to find your hotel. We provide a meet and greet service because it can be confusing to make it to the water taxi that will then take you to the entrance of your hotel. So the meet and greet service is really beneficial in that sense. But if you're staying in a hotel that is more centrally located, not on a canal, it can be really confusing the first time to try to find your hotel as well. So Enchanting Travels does provide a meet and greet service with assistance to your hotel, which is extremely beneficial, so you're not scrambling trying to find the entrance of your hotel when you first arrive. So I just wanted to point out those two really beneficial services that Enchanting Travels does offer. So this slide is of Burano and then an original Venice bridge. And I wanted to put both of these up there. One, the bridge I thought was really interesting because when you're walking around Venice, you see so many different bridges, and a lot of them have been updated and provided, railings and safety features. But I thought this was really cool to see, like in what the original bridges did look like. And we were taken to this area by our private tour guide. And I'm really grateful too that we had a private tour guide to kind of point out these details and show us these unique spots, because it really kind of brought to life the city for me. And I could really envision what Venice was like. I mean, hundreds of years ago when it first started, what it might have been like to walk around. So I thought that was really cool. And then we did have the chance to visit Murano and Burano. The one thing I wanted to point out about visiting these islands is there's different ways to visit. Enchanting Travels does offer a group tour or a shared tour and a private tour option. And I would recommend one of those options versus taking the public transport. We did experience both ways. So we booked a shared tour to go over there, and it was great. We ended up taking the public ferry back because we got lost in Burano actually and missed our boat. So we had to take the public ferry back, but I'm actually glad I experienced both, because now I can say the public ferry, yes, you can take it, but it is very crowded. It drops you off a little bit further away from San Marcos Square. And it was very crowded and very hot. We were there in September. So it was much more comfortable to be on the tour with a small group tour or or a private tour where you have a little bit more comfort and convenience. So just try not to get lost and miss your boat. You can move on to the next slide. This is the hotel that we stayed in, and I absolutely loved this hotel. This was actually in a more central residential location. It was closer to the Jewish ghetto and really close to the train station as well. But really quaint and charming hotel, beautiful courtyard for having breakfast in the morning and your coffee. And one of the things I loved most about the location is that you really felt like you were in a local area of Venice. It was not a touristy area at all. We walked out the entrance of our hotel, and right down the street, there was just kind of a half circle of restaurants and bars, and the locals gathered there at night, and they always had someone playing live music there, an accordion or guitar. And I really felt like it was a more immersive experience, and I was really getting a sense of the true local scene and local culture. So I loved that about the location of this hotel. However, it was about a 20 to 25-minute walk to get to San Marcos Square. So it'll be important when you're planning your trip to Italy and thinking about where to stay in Venice that you let your travel consultant know if you prefer to stay like in the heart of the action, where the main sites and tourist attractions are, or if you'd rather experience a quieter, more local area. So we can go ahead and move on to the next. So then we moved from Venice to Florence, and we did take the train. And the one thing I'd like to say about the train is that it's very simple and convenient. So if you've never been there, you shouldn't hesitate at all about taking the train for transportation. And we really enjoyed it. It was comfortable and like I said, very quick and convenient to zip in and out of the train station. We could go ahead and move on to the next slide. So we stayed actually to the left of the screen, right near the Vecchio Bridge, and I absolutely loved the location. It felt very central, even though it actually wasn't the middle of Florence, but to get to all the places that we wanted to see and all the things we wanted to do, it was great. We could walk everywhere, and it was a great location for having a view of the Arno River, and the location was great. So we do offer a lot of different options for staying on the Arno River near the Vecchio Bridge, or more central in Florence as well. But Florence is a very walkable city, so we didn't feel the need to take transportation while we were there at all. We walked everywhere. Go ahead and go to the next slide. I did want to point out, if you have time, I absolutely loved visiting the Boboli Gardens. It was beautiful. It's part of the Medici history, and it's just a large, expansive gardens that has panoramic views of the city from the higher elevations of the garden. And it's just so quaint, and you walk around and people are picnicking, and there's fountains, and the landscaping is gorgeous, and you see, you know, views of the landscaping around Florence, and it's just a beautiful area to visit if you have time. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And then this area we went to, it actually has a replica of the David, which is kind of cool, but it's also a huge area for people to go and watch the sunset over the town of Florence. So you get some really beautiful sunset views. They have vendors set up. They have, you know, little trinkets you can buy, and you can get drinks. And there's a bar that kind of overlooks all of Florence as well. So just a really beautiful area to walk and watch the sunset before you head for dinner. And then this is one of the hotels that we offer, that is right on the Arno River, next to the Vecchio Bridge. I mean, beautiful location, and a really nice luxury hotel as well. So I like to offer this for, you know, for the right guests, but it's a great location and great hotel in Florence. All right. Cinque Terre. So we did a day tour from Florence to Cinque Terre. And I'm glad that we did. I would say for people who really want to explore all 5 of the villages there, it is probably better to spend a night or 2 there, because although we did have some good quality time and probably the first 3 locations that we went to, I felt like it was very rushed at the end, just because it is such a long day. And so we didn't have a whole lot of time to spend in the last 2 villages that we went to, but we can work it in to do a day trip to Cinque Terre, or if you prefer to have a 1 or 2 night stay there, we can offer that as well. So this is just pictures that I took. Our guide was great to kind of take us to a great location to get these beautiful shots of the villages. The first one on the left is the first village on Cinque Terre, in the national park area. And then the one on the right, Manarola, is kind of the iconic picture that you see if you look up Cinque Terre. But very beautiful, very charming villages. We also had the opportunity to do a hike between Corniglia and Vernazzo, which I highly recommend if you enjoy hiking and kind of, you know, getting off the beaten path, and, you know, wanting to see some beautiful scenery and viewpoints and get a little exercise at the same time. It was a beautiful hike. We got to walk through some olive groves, and there's a little place to stop to get freshly squeezed lemon and orange. It was like a frozen drink, and it was just a really neat experience all around. So I would highly recommend it. Go ahead to the next slide. And this is just a picture of actually a couple photos I took. This was my favorite village to walk around. It just was so charming and had just these cute little alleyways. And I mean, it's one of those places that you just want to keep exploring and want to get lost in, because there's just so many charming alleyways and shops and and little cafes. So I absolutely loved this village. Okay, Tuscany. So we also did a day trip to Tuscany. And this is another area where if you really want to explore, because there's so many different medieval towns and wineries, if you really want to explore Tuscany, I would recommend staying 2 to 3 nights there. Or you can also do a day trip from Florence. And it's very easy to do that as well. We can set you up with a private driver, and you can do a tour that, you know, we kind of already have an itinerary set, or you can also work with your trip coordinator to create an itinerary that fits what you want to do and what you want to do and see there. But Tuscany is every bit as picturesque as you imagine. It's a wonderful balance of, you get the city experience in Florence, and then you drive out to the country and just, I mean, beautiful views of rolling hills and valleys and landscaping, and it's absolutely stunning there. So this was my favorite stop in Tuscany as far as experiencing a winery. Lots of history at this winery. It was an old castle, and they still use a lot of the original methods and techniques for making their wine. They also make balsamic vinegar and olive oil. They grow a lot of the herbs that they use around the gardens around the winery. And it's owned by a family now, and the family each has their own little role. And one of the daughters is a beekeeper, so she provides the honey, and the 90-year-old grandmother still lives there, and we got to see her eating her lunch. And you just kind of get the feel for what it would be like to live there. And I have to say, I wouldn't mind living there. It's just beautiful. The food was amazing. The wine, of course, was delicious. What you see on the right there is a technique that the monks actually originally created for making a dessert wine. So they completely dry out the green grapes, and they use the dry grapes to make the wine, and that's why it has a much sweeter taste. So I thought that was really neat that we were able to see that, because they were in the process of doing it. Go ahead to the next slide. This is a medieval town in Tuscany, really charming town. And what I loved about all the medieval towns is you can kind of stand on the outside and picture what it was like when people first lived there. I mean, it still feels like a fortress. It feels, you know, the medieval feel of it hasn't gone away. So I thought that was really neat. So when you visit these towns, there's usually only a few entrances, and it's a walled city basically. And then, so on the left is the entrance to go in, and the middle is the first kind of, you know, alley that you see that you walk down, and there's little shops and places to buy cheese and sausages and, you know, small little cafes and restaurants. And then you walk into like a big open plaza area. So just really, again, I think Tuscany is another one of those areas. Is, I mean, just like pretty much anywhere in Italy, but just exploring, and you're not really having an itinerary necessarily, but just walking around and discovering things, and you know, trying the samples of different food and drink, and just a really fun day and fun to explore. So then we went from Florence, we went to the Amalfi Coast, and we stayed in Positano. You can go ahead to the next slide. Oh, there we go. And this was actually a view from our hotel. So what I like to point out about staying in Positano is you can stay down like on the kind of low lying area where the beach is, and there's some restaurants and shops down there, and kind of look up at the scenery and the buildings built into the rocks, or you can stay at a higher elevation and look out and over. So the one thing about Positano that I like to explain between staying there versus Sorrento, Positano, obviously you're staying at probably different elevations, and walking around there, everything's very close together and condensed. So it's a good thing in the sense that restaurants are right there and shops are right there. But if you need to go down a street or down 3 or 4 streets, you're walking down very sometimes steep stairs and uneven ground. And the roads are very small and narrow. And most of the roads there are actually only one way. So even taking a cab sometimes you could be waiting because you have to wait for them to, drive all the way down the one road to come pick you up at the beach and then take you all the way back up. So we walked pretty much everywhere, but it is physically taxing at times, especially if you're going from the beach, walking all the way back up to your hotel. But it is an experience in itself. And I really, really loved my stay there, and the views are spectacular. So this is just a, example of kind of what you would see walking around Positano. Again, really fun to explore, really great dining options. Restaurants are fabulous there. They're fabulous everywhere. Go ahead to the next slide. And then again, the beach area, kind of looking up at Positano, the town of Positano. So if you are a beach person, I definitely would recommend possibly staying at one of the beach locations, one of the hotels there, or a little bit further down. This was in an area that we stopped, Villa Ruffalo, sorry, on our Amalfi Coast tour. And it was absolutely stunning. There's a lot of history there. It has kind of changed through hands through the years. So a lot of different wealthy families have owned the villa, but it's inspired a lot of literature and music and art, and they still hold like concerts and things actually on the grounds of the villa. But walking around and seeing the views, it's the gardens there are spectacular. So if you're someone who loves walking through gardens and seeing landscaping, I absolutely would recommend that you stop there on your Amalfi Coast tour. And this is one of the hotels that we offer in Positano. It's a wonderful hotel. I like to recommend it a lot for couples and for honeymooners. It's really romantic, beautiful spot on the hillside, and with amazing views, as you can see. So then Sorrento, this is a picture that I took from a viewpoint, but I think it gives you a really good idea of how it's so different from Positano. It's a much flatter town and much more walkable, although everything is more spread out. So there are times when you might need to take a cab, to get somewhere, because it is a lot more spread out, but definitely more walkable. And where you would catch the boat to go over to Capri is at the port in Sorrento. So it's convenient in that sense. It's also closer to Naples, so you don't have to travel as far to get to Sorrento once you exit the train station or the airport. And so these are just some of the things that you can do in Sorrento. You can do a lemon tour. We toured an olive oil factory, and honestly, I didn't know that I liked olive oil so much. And I think we ordered probably 5 or 6 different olive oils. So I'm still enjoying them back home, but it's really neat to see the production and really taste the difference in the olive oil that you can buy there versus in the US. Honestly, I don't think I'll ever buy olive oil in the US again because it's that good. Okay, next slide. And Pompeii, this, I knew of Pompeii, but I didn't realize the expanse of what is still there to actually tour and see. And it was astonishing to me, to be honest, that it was still there even after the volcano eruption and after all of these years, that what's still there has been preserved for so long, and that we're able to actually go and see it. So I highly recommend stopping in Pompeii. You can set it up as a tour from Sorrento or Positano or wherever you're staying in the Amalfi Coast. Or what I like to recommend, and what we do often, is to recommend an en route stop from either the Naples train station or the Naples airport. And you'll be set up with a tour guide for about a 2-hour tour of Pompeii. And it's so interesting to hear the guide talk about the stories of Pompeii and point out specific details around Pompeii as well, just to kind of bring to life. Like I was able to just kind of envision what it was like to live in Pompeii, and it was just kind of enhanced the overall experience versus if I were to just tour it myself. So I found it really interesting. And another thing that we like to do with Pompeii, quick note about that, is we paired it with a stop at a winery at the base of Vesuvius. So that was a neat experience because the grapevines are actually grown in the volcanic soil. So it was a really neat experience and a fun activity to do before heading to our hotel in Positano. So we did a day trip to Capri, and we actually shared group tour on the island of Capri, and then have some time to kind of explore on your own, possibly do the Blue Grotto on your own. There are, you can book it as a tour once you get there, book a boat once you get there. You can also do a private tour where you're actually still taking the public ferry over, but you have a private tour guide to take you around the island of Capri, and then also who has will take you on a boat once you get there to visit the Blue Grotto. And then the last way is to have a private boat with a skipper. So you have your own private captain and private boat that'll take you to Capri. So we did have the opportunity to visit the Blue Grotto. It is a very big tourist attraction. So the one thing I like to tell people is that if you decide to do that, you will be waiting for your turn, because they only take 4 people at a time in these small paddle boats, because the opening into the Blue Grotto is very small. So you actually have to lay flat to go inside. And they do let a few boats go in at the same time, but there's a lot of boats waiting in the water for their turn, plus people waiting on shore to get into a boat and go into the Blue Grotto. So I do like to make people aware of that and kind of set your expectations. So you do need time, possibly to wait for your turn to go in, but it's such a unique experience. I'm really glad I did it, and as you can see, it's absolutely beautiful. Walking around Capri is really stunning as well. I mean, just the landscaping, the flowers, the greenery, and then the views. The picture in the middle, we actually kind of came upon by accident. So we were just doing our own exploration, and we saw a sign to go and see this viewpoint. And then we actually ended up, again, getting lost in Capri. And we ended up on a very extensive hiking trail that it gave us some absolutely magnificent views of Capri and the area surrounding. So it was kind of a neat little mistake that we had. But I definitely would recommend talking to your trip coordinator or talking to your guide to be a little more strategic about walking around Capri so you don't get lost like we did. But absolutely loved this island. And again, you can also plan a stay in Capri if you want time to explore it more. So do a night or 2 on Capri. And that's a popular option especially for honeymooners as well. And last but not least, Rome was our last stop. And oftentimes I do make this the last stop for guests, just because typically international flights are much better out of Rome, both on the schedule and the price. So we didn't spend a whole lot of time here because we had been there before, but we did want to spend our last night there. And if you go to the next slide, it'll be of the Colosseum. So at nighttime, we were just doing our own exploring and walking. And I'm so glad that we walked over to the Colosseum and the Roman Forum, because the last time we were there was scaffolding everywhere. So I did not get a really nice picture of the Colosseum. And so I snapped this picture on my iPhone, and it just, the lighting, everything was perfect. And it just made me really happy. So, don't forget to do your exploring at nighttime too, and still take those pictures, because you just don't know what kind of pictures you're going to get, and might be even better than the daytime. Go to the next slide. So again, if you're going to do a tour of the Colosseum, this is what it looks like from the inside. And there's different options for that. 100% you want to do the skip the line option, but I would recommend a tour guide as well. And preferably a private tour guide, because there's just so many interesting stories and details about the Colosseum that I think, in order to maximize the experience, that's a really great option. And again, the Roman Forum, which is not far from the Colosseum. And again, if you do the private tour option or even the shared tour option with us, it includes both the Colosseum and the Roman Forum. And St. Peter's Basilica, even if you're not especially a religious person, I think just seeing the Vatican and walking through St. Peter's Basilica and learning about the history of it is really interesting. And it's the Basilica itself is absolutely stunning. And then the Vatican Museum. what I like to tell people about the Vatican Museum, and I'm really glad that we went in when we did in September, because if you're going during the summer months, you have to expect very large crowds. And our tour guide said, most of the time during the summer months, he can't even see the floor of the museum because there's so many people. So I do think that, especially during those times when there's large crowds, a private tour option would probably be better, because then you have the one-on-one time with your tour guide. You can go at your own pace. You can step off to the side if you need to ask questions and listen to the information and the knowledge that they have about what you're looking at. And I think that would help really give you a better experience versus being in a larger crowd, just kind of following along with the pack and not really knowing what you're looking at. This is a picture I took that that shows that it was absolutely perfect the time that we went. So a good reason to potentially think about visiting Rome and some of the other cities where you are going into the museums and spending a lot of time in museums, to maybe think about going in the off-peak season where you have less crowds, because then you can really enjoy all the museum has to offer, and take your time and see everything there is to see without kind of fighting through a crowded hallway. So the Rome Times Hotel, this is where we actually stayed. It's a good, moderate, mid-level resort and a great location. We did walk pretty much everywhere. We do have some more luxury options as well. But I just wanted to point out this particular hotel, mainly because I stayed there, but also because of the location. So Rome is a walkable city as well, but you are going to do a lot more walking. It is easy to catch a cab, but from this hotel, it's about probably a half mile to the Colosseum and the Roman Forum. We actually did walk from Vatican City and the Vatican Museums back to this hotel, which took us probably about 45 minutes. But again, if you don't want to do all that walking, it's very easy to catch cabs in the city. One thing I would recommend is to talk to your hotel concierge. If you're going from your hotel and want to take a cab somewhere, have the hotel set it up. That way, you're getting the true rate for that cab ride. If you are catching a cab yourself, sometimes if they know that you're a tourist, it could happen that they inflate the price a little bit. So that's a good reason why we encourage people to set up transfers and drivers, because then you know what you're paying and you know the service that you're getting versus taking the taxis or cab rides and potentially paying more than you should be. But again, talk to your hotel concierge, get an idea of what the cab rates should cost to get you to and from the hotel, and then that way you know what you should be paying when you get into a cab. Is just a little tip I have for you. So again, this is a cute little hangout area in the hotel, and there's a nice breakfast as well, and a nice little barista and bartender, super friendly, cute little quaint area for your breakfast or your cocktail at night before you head out for dinner. And that's it for Italy.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Shannon. I really enjoyed that. As an Italian, I feel like you really nailed it. You hit all of the highlights. We're going to go ahead and hand it over to Bo to go through our Greece section.
Thank you, guys. Shannon, that was awesome. I definitely want to go to Italy. It's been on my list for a long time anyways, but after that, I think I need to go sooner than later. Just in the interest of time, I'm going to move pretty quickly. I got a lot of pictures I want to show off, but before I do, I kind of want to give you guys some context on why I'm talking about Greece today. If you would have asked me a year ago, I wouldn't have thought I would be, because I didn't have any experience in Greece. My now wife and I had actually planned a honeymoon in Sri Lanka right when the pandemic began. Made it halfway, and we got to London, had to turn around and come home. So after just seeing how things went, we decided to do Greece for our honeymoon instead, which ended up being kind of a blessing in disguise. I mean, of course, we'll want to do Sri Lanka at some point, but we just found Greece to be such an amazing country. People were so warm. Food is amazing. We ate way too much cheese every day, it seemed like. Great wine, great history, just really unique culture and very rich. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that throughout the presentation. Also talk to you about how we can kind of make a trip to Greece with Enchanting a little bit more special for you. So you can see in the map, I did 4 destinations. That's what I'm going to focus on for my presentation today. We started in Athens, ended up doing 3 different islands, Milos, Naxos, and Santorini. So let's start out in Athens. Most of our guests that are going to do a Greece trip are going to start and finish in Athens. Sometimes you can fly out of Santorini or some other places, but most of the international flights are going to be in and out. So you're definitely going to want to spend, maybe 2-3 nights there, check out the history. Obviously, you can see in that picture, it's a gorgeous city. You've got the Acropolis kind of towering over everything. In this next picture here, you'll get an even better view of it. Yeah, so that's a little bit of a zoomed in picture. I remember before I went, I was really intent on having a Acropolis view hotel room. And then when I got there, I realized you can see the Acropolis from everywhere, which is pretty cool. So, one of the benefits of doing a trip there with us is we've got great guides. You're going to get a guide that will tell you as much or as little, if you kind of like to do things on your own, about the history there. And there's tons of it. The Acropolis is very rich in history. In this next picture, you're going to see the Parthenon. Everybody knows it. This was especially cool for me because, some of you probably know there's actually a replica in Nashville where I grew up. So we spent a lot of time at that park. Seeing the real version was much more impressive, something I'd wanted to do for a long time. And our guide was really great about telling us all the history of it. This next picture, you're going to see one that I actually took myself. A lot of these pictures I can't take credit for. I'm not as good of a photographer, but I did take this one. I just thought it was so cool to be able to see the entire theater with the background of the city there. And this is still an active theater. So if that's something that you're interested in, you're doing a trip with us, that's something we could definitely organize for you. You have a trip coordinator that'd be happy to arrange tickets for you, get good seats, and make sure you're seeing something that you're interested in. Something I always recommend really for any of the destinations we travel to is as soon as you can, do a food tour. The big advantage to doing it right off the bat is you're going to have an idea of what you might want to try for the rest of the trip. So we planned a food tour our first full day in Athens, and I'd heard of Greek coffee. I'm a big coffee drinker, but had never tried it myself, and it was, no joke, the best coffee I've ever had. One of the perks of doing this with a guide that's local and knows what they're talking about is they shared with us before we took our first sip that there's going to be mud at the bottom. It drains to the bottom. You don't want to drink that. If you look around Athens and you watch tourists as they try it on their own for the first time, a lot of times you'll see them do that. And then, they're making a bad face. So we just drank the best part, had a great time on the food tour, and really just ate good throughout the trip. The hotel we stayed at was called Eli or Mu. As you can see, I talked about wanting that Acropolis view. You definitely get it from this hotel. They have a rooftop bar. You have breakfast there. You can go up for coffee. That's what you're looking at there on top. So this is actually taken from the building behind the hotel. Food's really good, great service, great view, just a really good atmosphere. This next picture, I kind of wanted to focus on the one on the bottom left. That's pretty much the exact view we had from our room. So nice private balcony, take a bottle of wine out there, relax. Seeing the Acropolis light up at night is just a must do, in my opinion. And, when you're doing a trip with Enchanting, we'll make sure that you get the rooms with the view that you want. Staying in hotels that have been tested by us, and we know that they have good service and a good record. So our first island stop was Milos. As you can see, like the picture speaks for itself. It's gorgeous. The water is so clear. We did the trip in September, so we were kind of at the end of peak season, which is really a good time to go. If you're going in August or September, the seas had some time to warm up and you can swim comfortably. It was really unlike any other place I'd ever been. As you're going to see in this next picture, Sarakoniko is just like something from a different planet. There's a beach there literally called Moon Beach because it looks like you're walking on the moon. So just really unique landscapes. I've traveled in a lot of different places, never seen anything like this. Definitely a highlight and something you have to do if you're going to visit Milos. Another place that really stood out for us was Mondraki Bay. Just really, really cool, tiny. I think there was maybe 5 other people around when we drove down. As you can see, they have the little garage. They're almost like garages for boats. Just very quaint, tiny little villages. This was a destination where I think it might be a good idea to rent a car. You know, a lot of the trips we organized were organizing private drives for you, so you don't have to worry about it. You could do Milos that way, but you know, that's the kind of conversation you'd have with your travel consultant in the planning stage of the trip. Talk about the pros and cons. For me, it was definitely a pro to have a car on Milos because there were so many different little villages that you might want to check out. You could do them in a day tour, but this way you can kind of stick around and stay as long as you'd like. The next picture here you see is Sagrado Beach. This was also a highlight. If the picture was taken from the other angle, you'd see that the only way you access this beach is actually through climbing down a ladder, and a pretty steep ladder at that. So we didn't actually go in that way. The way that we accessed it was by boat. And there's several other tiny beaches along the coast here. And the tour that was organized by us, everything I did was through our company. They took us to a private beach where it was my wife and I. That was it. You know, we were just the only ones on the beach. And when you're doing a honeymoon or any kind of trip, you just want to be special. A lot of times, the ones that are going to stick with you are those experiences where there's not a lot of other people around. So definitely a highlight for us. This was the accommodation where we stayed. Great place. Santa Maria it's probably in the 3 to 4 star category. It's there are some luxury properties. In my opinion, you didn't need to do that. Obviously, if that's your thing, we can arrange that for you. But this place was so nice, good value for money. Sits up on the hillside, as you can kind of see in the picture, and you get to have your breakfast out by the pool. It was about a 10-minute walk to get down to the main area where all the restaurants are along the coast, getting good seafood, great view in the morning. So just a really good vibe all the way around. And the next picture here, you get a little bit better idea of the view. That top left one, yeah, that was pretty much what we had from our hotel room. Just waking up to that, you can see we've got the fruit and the wine glasses out. At the end of a day, if you're like to be active and you're out checking out a lot of stuff and maybe doing some hiking, just sitting out on your balcony at the end of the day, it's the best way to finish a day, in my opinion. So the next place that we stopped is called Naxos. Milos is pretty popular. I wouldn't say it's not as well known as Santorini, but Naxos is definitely one of those off the beaten path type islands. Totally different vibe. Really, all of the islands we went to had a very different vibe. Different things they're known for. Even the people seem different from place to place. Naxos, I think because it is a little bit off the beaten path, the people were just so welcoming. We had the best service there. Really just like, every restaurant we went into, people wanted to know about you, ask where you're from, tell you about their own country and culture. And, those are the things, again, that really stick out for us. So as you can see, it's a beautiful island. There's my wife there doing a little pose. We love just kind of walking around. The streets are meandering. There's tiny little alleyways. Just the white buildings, the architecture is just really charming. So there's so many good photo ops really on all these islands. But again, Naxos has the really traditional white and blue, and you're going to see that a little bit later in the Santorini photos as well. So I mentioned it's off the beaten path. I mean, you're not going to get a picture like this in islands like Santorini where there's just so much tourism. There's not a person in the picture, and that was awesome. I think this was around 5 o'clock. You'd think it'd be pretty busy. We had the streets to ourselves and just kind of roaming around, taking pictures, stopping into shops, just very laid back environment. We loved it. Here's a little action shot for you guys. I hesitated to put this on there because I kind of have some bad form, but we had a good time. So we did a boat tour on Naxos. Again, this is something that our company can organize, and we can kind of tailor it. You can do it private, you can do it with a group. We decided to do this one with a group. It was just cool to kind of interact with people. We had people from all over the world on our boat tour. And our guides were great. They took us to this rock where you could climb up if you wanted to, take a dive, take a leap. We did several adventure activities. I mean, I think a lot of people don't think of Greece as an adventure destination, but there's snorkeling, there's hiking, cliff jumping, a lot of stuff like that. If you do like to be active, it's definitely a place where you can do that. There's my wife enjoying one of our mini orange pies. That was something that they're famous for on Naxos. Usually whenever I go, I'm traveling, I want to try different foods and go to different restaurants as much as possible. This restaurant was so good that we literally went 2 nights in a row. And it wasn't just the food. The people were just so welcoming. I felt like we knew them somehow, even though we ate there twice. But yeah, the food was top notch, so authentic. And again, if you're doing a trip with us, as opposed to trying to plan something on your own, you're going to get those tips from us, not just in the planning stage, but also your trip coordinator is happy to make restaurant recommendations, make reservations for you, really just help, have a seamless experience. So this is where we stayed in Naxos. One of the reasons we chose to go to this island is because, I think a lot of people think of beaches when they think of Greece. Surprisingly, not every island is great for beaches, but Naxos is. So we went there kind of in the middle of our trip to have some relaxation. As you can see, great pool. Again, you have breakfast around there. Just a really relaxing destination. In this next picture, you've got a few different views from Galaxy Hotel. I want to focus on the one on the top left there. That was our view from our hotel room. So as you can see, the beach is right there. I mean, it was like a 2-minute walk. And, that's hard to find in a lot of these islands. So if you guys do have interest in being really close to a beach, the beach there was gorgeous. We had great service. They're bringing you drinks. They're bringing you food right there on the beach all day. Hop in the water when you get hot. So, a great place to stay if you want to be walkable. Our last stop, we tried to save the best for last. Santorini is unlike any place I've ever been. I mean, everyone's seen these pictures, but seeing it in person is just something that is going to stick with me forever. I think the main experience there is just kind of walking around, checking out the views, having a nice glass of wine, having some coffee, just really enjoying the atmosphere. And we did a lot of that. So many good restaurants, so many good places to try different foods that we hadn't had before. So, if you want that traditional Greek experience, Santorini is definitely going to be a place to go. So this is actually just below the last picture I showed you guys, Amudi Bay. So, the cliffside is kind of the unique feature of Santorini. You're up so high, but it is possible to walk down to the water. So it was about a 10-minute walk for us, probably 20-minute walk back up. It is very steep, but once you get down there, it's amazing. I mean, these are very small, quaint, seafood restaurants. We had great food there, great views, great sunsets. Santorini is also famous for their sunsets for sure. And in my last picture here, you're about to see, this was probably one of my favorite things we did and one of my favorite shots. So, catamaran tour in Santorini, definitely a must do. Anybody that's going there, I feel like this is the tour that you need to do. And again, doing it through Enchanting, we can talk about the pros and cons of doing it privately versus doing it in a group. We chose to do it in a group. As I said before, we like the social aspect. Great food on the boat. You got to see one side of the entire island. It takes about 4 or 5 hours to get up the coast. And then you've got this amazing sunset to look forward to at the very end. So just a great way to finish the trip and something I would definitely recommend. So that's my presentation on Greece. If you guys have questions, I know Lucia's going to give out our information. If you want to ask questions now, email me questions later. I just love talking about Greece. Again, it's unlike anywhere I've been. If you've been there before, but it's the kind of place where you can go back and see something different every time. So I'd love to talk to you if it's something you're interested in.
All right. Thank you so much, Bo, and thank you, Shannon. And thanks to everyone who joined us this evening. We are going to take a quick break from our Wanderlust webinar series over the winter holidays, but we'll be back soon. And if you'd like to know more about the webinars as we move forward, you can always sign up for our newsletter. We will be reaching out after this with some follow-ups for you, and we will be in touch shortly. And you're always welcome to reach out to us and talk to us about any questions you have about Italy, Greece, or anywhere else in the world. So thank you so much for joining us this evening, and have a good night.